Welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we told you we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another lovely, wonderful guest, Lois Wagner, and we're going to bring Lois up to introduce herself. Welcome, Lois.
Hi, thanks very much for having me. Hi, Sid. Hi, Demetria.
If you could tell us a little bit about yourself to the audience, and then Sid is going to kick off the first question.
Oh, how much do you want to know? I've lived 70 years. I've got a lot to share.
If you could whatever you could sum up in 2 minutes, and then we're going to get to it through the podcast.
Okay. I always say smile with Lois, and I use the acronym SMILE to describe me myself. S is for I'm a speaker and storyteller. M is a mentor. I, inspirer. L is I'm a learning facilitator. And E, an empowering coach. So that's who I am in less than 2 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today again. So we, with every guest, excuse me, always start at the beginning. We do like to know if you could tell us a little bit about your home structure growing up and if you did experience any trauma as an adolescent.
I am the third of 3 children. I was born on my sister's 8th birthday, and I think I caused her a lot of trauma to spoil her 8th birthday party. And we were not wealthy. We were very middle class. My father worked on the railways. He was a keen gardener, and he had a carnation farm, which burnt down, and it put us deep into debt. So we really, really struggled financially for most of my childhood. Well, in fact, for all of my childhood. And the trauma that was there was very strict parents, very controlling parents, a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, a lot of that kind of thing. There was some physical trauma. So it was a tough upbringing, but it gave me a lot of resilience.
Okay, well, we got a lot to dig into, and I'm ready. So can we start back in childhood with, I guess, some of the things that you went through? Because we have a lot of folks that have went through things as traumas, and they're afraid to talk about it. So can you tell us some of the things that you went through as a child?
Well, it was more emotional trauma for me. I think my sister had a bit more physical abuse, but it did nothing that wasn't sort of the norm in those days. We going back 60 years. It was everybody went through that, so we didn't see it as trauma. We didn't see it as anything out of the ordinary at the time. It was tough. It was just tough being poor. It was tough seeing friends of mine go on holidays in fancy hotels and flying on holiday, and we couldn't do that. So, yeah, I didn't see it as trauma then, and even today, I don't really see it as trauma. It was uncomfortable, it was difficult, but...
Understood. And in what type of ways would you say your parents were controlling? What are some specific examples that you can think about?
Well, they partied a lot. There was a lot of drinking and drunken parties, and they would call you out of bed at midnight to come and play the piano for them, for their guests, and tell you, just ordering you around to clean up, fix up, do this, do that. So it was almost bullying rather than trauma. It wasn't that. It wasn't for me. I know my sister had a lot worse than me. So yeah, it was just ordering us around, telling us children should be seen and not heard, not being allowed to be who we were.
So how did that make you feel, not feeling like who you are, who you were supposed to be, who you were, and having to be a part of adult gatherings and partying, and you're a child. So I know that somehow that.
Well, I hated all the noise and the partying and the drunkenness. I really felt uncomfortable. I felt that I was just there to be shown off. Um, so it was hard from that aspect. But on the other hand, it was quite nice. I'm recognized. They want me to come and play piano. They want me to do things. So it was a bit of a, there was some enjoyment to it, that they recognized my abilities. And so, yeah, there were some upsides to it. Um, One of the downsides was that I lived in my sister's shadow. My sister was extremely talented and capable and artistic and creative, and I was none of those things. So, always trying to live up to my sister's standards was quite challenging for me. Again, whether that caused trauma, I don't know. I suppose I never really blossomed to become my true self because of that.
Yes. And did I guess any of that cause any rifts between you and your siblings, or were any of you, treated differently? Who was the rebel? Who was falling in line? What was that structure like?
My sister fell in line. My brother did as he was told, and I was the rebel. So I was a rebel. I ran away from home a couple of times. Yeah, I was the naughty one.
So what made you run away from home?
It was just that controlling. I wasn't allowed to do what I wanted to do. I had to do the housework. Looking back now, all kids have to do the housework. But at the time, my friends didn't, because they all had servants. So it was, why me? So I really hated being told. I hated the parties. I hated the drunkenness. And so I just wanted to get out. So I ran away.
Understood. And how long did that last? Usually it's not it's not too long.
My
How long
brother
were
was
you able to take it?
my brother was sent to find me within 24 hours.
Oh
Understood.
wow. Yeah. Say, do you have something else to say? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I want to jump into, because you had some interesting key points when we chatted. When I chatted with you, can you tell us a little bit about, because there's some significant pieces in your life that happened, and one of them you were brutally assaulted. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, I was around 40 years old and I had my own business. I was working late one night in my premises, and a stranger jumped what I thought was a secure 8-foot wall, jumped over the wall and attacked me with a screwdriver. And I fought. I fought with everything I had, but I was overpowered, and he stabbed me many times, and he strangled me, and eventually cut me with a broken glass and forced me into a wall and raped me.
Goodness. And how old were you at that time?
40.
Goodness. How was he, I guess, able to either corner you or get you alone?
Well, he climbed this 6-foot, 8-foot wall. He climbed the wall, which I thought nobody would ever climb, but he climbed over the wall. And I was working in the little courtyard. And yeah, that's where he attacked me. The first I knew he was there was he was standing behind me and he had a screwdriver in my neck.
Whoa. So did they ever catch him, or?
They caught him within 5 minutes. He tied me up with strapping, but when he broke the glass, I managed to get a piece of the glass and hide it in my hand. So the minute he left, he stole my car. The minute he left, I cut myself free and I phoned the police. And the police caught him literally within 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure that was devastating for a 14-year-old. And what was
40-year-old.
40,
14?
40,
Oh,
yeah.
40. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, for any age, really. Um, Now, what was the fallout from that? What were the next steps? Did you have to testify? Was this a long drawn out kind of court case? What was the fallout of that incident?
Well, it's good. The fallout of the actual court case, it happened very quickly. I was very fortunate that it happened very quickly. But immediately afterwards, I became an activist and I marched the streets and I lobbied and I did everything I could to change the way people saw the world. Because, all those years ago, we're talking 20, 30 years ago, people didn't talk about this. It was something that was pushed under the rug and everyone avoided talking about it. So I wanted to bring it to the world attention and say, hey, this happens and this happens to ordinary people. And so I became an activist. And during this time, we went to court. It was a 2-day court hearing, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison again, which was unheard of. In those days, the maximum people got was 10 years.
You're on mute. You're muted.
He deserved more time than that. Can you tell us? Do you know how many times exactly he stabbed you with the screwdriver? And can you tell us the areas that he stabbed you in?
In my neck, in my ear, in my mouth. He broke my teeth, in my stomach, in my arms, everywhere.
Oh God, with a dull screwdriver. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Oh Lord.
What were the I guess extent of your injuries? Were you okay? Did you have to spend a significant time in the hospital?
Well, I bled profusely. The first police on the scene was a woman detective who specialized in these kind of cases, and she said she'd never seen anything as bad in terms of all the blood. But my ear was perforated, as I say, all my teeth were broken, and yeah, it was. I only spent. I'd refused to spend a night in hospital. I wanted to go home. So I went to emergency. They stitched me up as best they could. And I went home. So I never even spent one night in hospital.
So were there? What were the complications from what he did to you? Like, did it affect your ability moving forward in certain areas?
Well, the first thing was I couldn't dive. I was a scuba diver. I couldn't dive because of my ear. He perforated the eardrum, so I couldn't equalize, so I could no longer dive, which was for me a tragic experience. But the worst part was that because I was in partnership, this business I had, I was in partnership, and I didn't want to work there anymore. And so I wanted to sell the business to my partner. And instead of buying me out, he betrayed me and he put the business into liquidation, and we lost the business and I lost everything and I went deep into debt.
Well, that is a significant residual of that experience. So, oh my gosh, I'm again so sorry about that. Now, what was he? Well, first I want to kind of back up. Did this happen? It sounds like you have an accent. Did this happen in the U.S. or your home country? And what are their laws surrounding that type of thing? If this wasn't America.
Okay, it's in South Africa, and as I said, in those days, it wasn't seen as a major crime, and 10 years was the maximum that people got for that crime back in those days. So yeah, it was a fantastic result to get 25 years. It was really well managed by the prosecutor.
Do you know if this was a hate crime or just someone meant? I mean, it's definitely mental health issues,
No,
period. But
it was opportunistic. He apparently had watched me the night before. I'd worked there the night before, and he saw that I was alone. It was opportunistic. I wasn't his first victim. he had raped before.
Gosh, now was he I guess charged for anything else, found in charge for the other things, or did they connect that at the time of your scenario?
No, the one he did before, he was out on bail. He was out on bail for the first one. So that's how lenient the law treated it in those days. That, hey, he did this, he can go out on bail.
And what was your were you single, in a relationship? What was your status at that time? And did it cause any issues, with either a significant other or family?
I had an on-off boyfriend at the time, and it did cause problems. He was out of the country at the time. And when he came back, and I told him about it, I never saw him again after that. So,
Hold on. So you told your boyfriend what happened to you. He didn't give you any comfort or anything. He just left
no, he was very nice, and he held me, and he let me cry, but he never came back.
and never called you again. Ooh, that's cold hearted.
I'm sorry, that was okay. Now, with that all being said, did you have any support from family as well, or were there any issues from there, from that side of things?
I had the most fantastic support from my family and friends. I really, really had brilliant support. My sister and my closest girlfriends, they were just there for me 24/7. So really, and I just say to anybody, just find support. You need to have somebody in your corner. But I wanted to tell you about something that happened 2 years later, because I became an activist, and I was out there changing. I wanted to change the law. I wanted to change the world. I wanted this to stop. I never dealt with my emotions. I kept them bottled up and said, "Oh, this is wrong. We must fix this. We've got to make this work." And 2 years later, I one morning couldn't get out of bed. My legs, my back just collapsed. I couldn't get out of bed. Went to the hospital, had 2 back operations. Both of them failed. The surgeon said I would never hike again. I was a keen hiker, and I would never scuba dive again because I could never carry anything on my back. And I thought, well, that's it. My life's over. And then my sister pointed out to me that it was psychosomatic, that there was nothing wrong with my back. It was all in my head. Because I hadn't dealt with the emotions, I was putting it behind me and putting it behind me and putting it behind me until eventually my back collapsed. And it was the body saying, hey, you've got to deal with this now. And so I dealt with it. I dealt with those emotions. I went for 8 chiropractic treatments, and I did a 5-day hiking trail with a 29-kilogram backpack on my back.
Hold up. So I have a question. So your sister told you it was psychological, but what about the 2 back surgeries? Did the doctors misdiagnose what was going on? Was it an unnecessary surgery?
It was an unnecessary surgery.
Whoa. So what happened after you found out it was an unnecessary surgery?
Nothing. How can you prove it's unnecessary? I had one doctor said to me, he looked at the x-rays, he said he would never have operated. It's one doctor's opinion versus another doctor's opinion.
My gosh, that's loaded. That's a loaded one. Now, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Now, with the fallout from, let me see, from being assaulted and things like that, what was your mind frame like at that time, or what kind of treatment plan, or kind of how did you feel that you were able to kind of pick up and move past that? What was that plan like to get you past that moment?
Well, it was really just going inside, analyzing my emotions. Why did I feel like that? What was I doing about that feeling? Was it a good feeling, a bad feeling? And working with the emotions. And I had support again from my family. I did go to a psychologist, but it didn't work for me. I only went for 3 or 4 treatments, and I didn't find it satisfactory. I found my family and friends were far more effective than the psychologist. So I just dealt with it on an inner level, just working through it in my mind, and dealing with those emotions and writing about it and talking about it.
Do you feel like that caused a sense of like paranoia or fear to be around men um after your attack?
Not at all, not at all. I didn't fear men. Sex the first time was a bit difficult, but after that, no, it was one horrible person. I can't blame all men for that.
Understood. Now, were you? I'm not sure how it works, but were you made aware or informed once he was, released? And did that bring out any, kind of negative, deep, harsh feelings for you?
Well, long before he was released, I was now living outside of the country. I'd been out the country for 14 years, and I was coming back for my first holiday back to South Africa. And in that 14 years, I'd never inquired as to whether he was still in prison. Sometimes they die or they get released for whatever reason. And for some reason, I decided to contact the authorities. And they told me that he was coming out on parole. He was coming up for a parole hearing the day that I arrived, or the day after I arrived back in the country. And that was quite coincidental. And then, in addition, the law in South Africa had just changed, allowing what they call victims of serious crime to attend a parole hearing. It was a brand new law. And so I just thought these coincidences are too big. I must go to the parole hearing. And against the advice of all my family and friends, saying, no, I mustn't go. I'll get hurt. I'll get triggered. I went. So I went to the prison. I was the first person in South Africa to attend one of these new parole hearings. And it was quite an experience. And then they just said, did I have anything to say to him? And I just said, yes, I compassionately and completely forgive you. And I take the responsibility from my higher self and I hand it over to your higher self. And that was it. I forgave him.
So after you forgave him, was he allowed to respond back to you? Did he ever apologize to you? And did they let him out? Did they release him early?
No, he served his full 25 years. He did thank me for forgiving him. I can't, after I forgave him, I don't remember much. I just remember I flew out of that prison. I didn't walk out, I flew out. Hence my butterfly. It's all about flying free.
Sorry, for sure. So, what was, following the incident? What was your next, significant moment? What were you able to, accomplish, get done, or even put in works after that incident happened with you?
Well, as I said, I lost the business, so I had to go back into gainful employment. I had to get a job. And so I went back into the corporate world and I worked for many years back in the corporate world, and changed jobs a few times and just carried on. Life carried on. Then when it came to forgiving, I decided to write my book telling the story, but I never published it. I just never got around. Life was quite good for me at that time. I was traveling the world. I was having a good time. And so I just put the book on the back burner and just carried on living.
I want to ask really quick. Did the did your surgeries um create worse issues because they were unnecessary? And were there any complications?
Well, as I said, the first operation failed. I didn't even leave the hospital. They did the second operation. And then they sent me home because the medical aid wouldn't cover the hospital care anymore. And so I went home with a home nurse, and I was bedridden for practically 6 months. So yeah, until I did the inner work, I never got on with my life. I was literally bedridden.
And how long was that? And how long did it take before you can, kind of resume the regular rate of life?
About 6 months.
Yes. Now, was that spent entirely in the hospital, or were you, just kind of
I
bedridden
was
at home as well?
I was home. I was only in the hospital for a couple of weeks after the op.
Okay.
So
Wow.
they never told you why a surgery you didn't need wasn't successful.
No, the surgeon who told me that looked at my x-rays and he said, I can't see why they operated. I can see nothing in your x-rays. It was his opinion versus the other surgeon's opinion. So, yeah, who's right, who's wrong, who knows?
Now, are there any particular injuries that happened at that time that you are still dealing with at this time?
Not anymore, but I had teeth issues for years and years. I had the hearing issues for a long time. And I've got a few scars that, sometimes I look at them and I say, oh dear, I remember that. So,
Wow. Can you tell folks, because I kind of went through the same thing you did with therapy, was kind of went through it, learned some techniques, and I realized that sharing my life experience to people going through the same thing was more effective for me. So can you tell folks how you started that journey and how it helped you from your support system being around you through going through
okay,
your traumatic process?
initially, as I said, becoming an activist, I was out there calling the odds, telling this has got to stop. We can't allow this to happen. So being an activist made me very public, made me, very visible. And I don't recommend people do that. You need to have a strong support system if you're going to go public. But I do recommend talking about it because the more you talk, the more you share the story, the more you're releasing it from yourself and you're sharing it with the universe, and the more people are taking some of that pain away. So talking about it, and if you've got no one to talk to your mirror, talk to your dog or your cat, but do talk about it. And then write. There's so many ways of doing this. You can write it down. You can write how you hate the person. You can write whatever you want, and then you can burn it. You can do a ritualistic ceremony and say, I release this to the universe. Or you can do what I did and start the very night it happened. I started writing my book because right there and then I said the story has got to be told. And so I started writing my book, and it took me 20, 30 years before I published it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you were able to pick that back up and continue on with that goal no matter how long it took. So y'all hear that? If you're working on something, there's no expiration date. Keep working on it till it's done. That's a great message.
Absolutely. Don't give up, as the old saying goes.
Yes, man. Now, I guess what was the process of your writing? Being as though you did have a kind of a long, brief pause on it. Um, you know, how does your kind of writing process work? Is that just taking notes and brainstorming, or you just full on are writing the story as it comes to you? You know, how would you explain to someone how to kind of put their ideas down for someone who does not know where to start?
Well, what I did, I started writing it as a journal. So it was a day by day blow of how I'm feeling, my attitude, my emotions, people's reactions. So it really was like a diary. And then it got quite boring because diaries can be very boring. And that's why I put it aside the first time. And then when I forgave him, I thought, oh, now I've got a story to tell. So I thought, now I do have this story. And I then started putting it together. But then, as I said, life took over and I was enjoying myself. And so the book took a back seat. And then only when I returned to South Africa at age 65 that I finally write the conclusion. But basically now the book changed its format, because before it was just a diary. Now it became a combination of a book and a self-help guide. So I've taken elements of the experience and I've said, how can you deal with this? What should you do about this? How can you handle this? So I've changed, so it changed the format quite a lot.
And you have a super dope book cover too. So as y'all seen in the intro, that it's a very beautiful book cover. Um, do you um do you feel as though now, because I asked this like based off from childhood to adulthood, because you felt the urge to be like your sister or need to be like your sister. When did that stop? And I know some people still feel like it, but what age did that stop that you felt like you needed to be like her?
I don't think it ever stopped.
And I was going to ask, is it still is it? Do you still feel like that?
Oh, unfortunately, she's no longer with us. Um, so I can't be like her anymore. But I have realized, and I realized many years back, that I am my own person with my own strengths and my own personality. And I don't have to live up to her standards and her abilities. But I've always admired and just absolutely loved her and just wished I had a few more of her skills.
That's beautiful. Definitely. So I want to go into a little bit about, I guess, the book in general. So, um, when did you know that you were finished with it? Being as though you kind of sat it down. I'm sure, probably thoughts from 30 years ago didn't really hit the same as they probably do now, or you feel a little bit differently about things. So when did you exactly know that you were, done and ready to throw this into publication?
Well, when I realized that the story could help other people, if I turned, and I gave the lessons learned. So it includes the lessons I've learned and how people can help themselves, where they can get support, how they can get support, and how you can build your resilience to overcome. And at that same time, realizing that I was a business coach, turning into personal coaching and coaching people in overcoming trauma. So I realized that at age 65 that I'm changing my career from an executive coach to a personal coach, and the book was sort of the launch pad for that.
Okay. So, I have a question. What in the book, because we're not going to talk, we want people to read the book, but what is something that would draw someone that is going through a life experience that you experience that would draw them to the book and it could potentially help them?
But I think just the fact that it's a raw story, there's no holds barred. It really is a raw story. And that when people read it, they can say, oh, I'm not alone. I also felt like that. In fact, a friend of mine read it, and she was never raped, but she had an abusive husband. And as she said, she felt all of those emotions herself, but she had never been able to express it. And it helped her come to terms with what she had experienced, even though her circumstances were so completely different. So I think is what the strength is. It's just raw and true, and it calls it as it is.
Awesome. And what was your for our viewers that do have things that they may possibly want to put out or are working on? Which way did you go for publication? Was it self-publication? Did you publicate on a platform that helped you out a little bit? What was that process like? Actually getting a tangible item that we now call your book.
It was self-published, but I had some help from a publisher friend who put his name on the book, but he certainly helped me with some of the finer details that I was battling with.
What how do I want to say this? What can you say to folks that want to share their life experience in a book or tell it in the story, to give them motivation to just do it?
You've just got to be yourself. You've got to be authentic. Don't try and copy somebody else. Don't, you just call it as you see it. Be yourself. Authenticity is the most important thing. You don't have to reveal everything. I was very vulnerable and I exposed everything, all the finer details. You don't have to go into that level of depth. You can get a really strong story without even mentioning some of the horrible things that happened. Focus on the emotions more, because that is what's important. It's dealing with the emotions.
Absolutely. Yes. I had a question in my mind and it just lost me. Goodness, it was a good one too. Just that quick. Let me see here. How did you choose, the name Walking Without Skin? How did that, set for you? How was that important to you, as the title of the book?
Well, it's just about being vulnerable. I played around with a lot of names and I liked, because it's so raw and it's so real. I first had the idea of walking on broken glass, but there's a song like that. And I thought, well, that's not going to work because people will think of the song. So I just thought, the skin is what holds you together. The skin is your protection. And so I'm being vulnerable and I'm letting go of all of that and I'm walking without skin.
I love it. I love it. Um, as of now, I know you've been through a lot. Do you feel like you have healed through it all, or do you feel like it's always continued each day to uphold that peace, that healing, to continue that journey?
I had this discussion with a friend the other day. Are we ever truly healed? And I've always said, yes, I'm completely healed. Uh, Although a couple of months ago there was a shootout, there was a big shootout, and I heard all the automatic weaponry going off, and it just brought back memories, even though there was no gun involved in my attack. It just made me think of my attack. So, am I truly healed? I'd like to say yes, but am I? I don't know.
Absolutely. It's definitely not a linear process for
Oh,
sure.
definitely not. Definitely not.
Yes. Now, are you, is it kind of like with your book, I'm glad it's over. It took this far to get done. I'm just going to, revel in the fact that it's done. Or are you working on others or plan to work on others? What is that goal look like for you?
Well, I want to publish a book now, slightly different, but it's about overcoming any kind of challenge or adversity, not just something as traumatic as that. So it could be overcoming the loss of a job or the loss of the death of somebody close, or any challenge or adversity that we mustn't give up, that we can keep going. I've got a podcast that I call Finding Your Feet After Failure, and so it's about overcoming. And yes, I'm working on overcoming.
Beautiful. That is awesome. Um, can you for a female that has went through being brutally attacked by someone, can you help, or something that helped you just kind of cope with it, to get through with it? Because some folks struggle to the point that they don't want to be here anymore, or it could be a child involved, just certain issues of a female being violated. Can you just give something that helped you through that, coping through someone violating you?
Okay, the first step really is just to separate the incident from the emotions, because you can't change what happened. It happened, you can't change that. So you need to deal with the emotions because you're living with the emotions. So my focus is say, yes, it's sad that it's happened, it's bad that it's happened. Uh, Move away from the incident and say, how am I feeling about it? And work with that. And work with that with the help of support, be it a psychologist, be it a friend, be it just get some support where you can share how you are managing those emotions. And there's so many techniques out there, there's so many different therapies. What works for me is not going to work for you. Try one. If it doesn't work, move on to the next one. Go for another one. You will find the one that works for you. And as you said just now, Sid, it's not a linear process. But the first stage, when you first have the bad experience, you're a victim, and it's important that you accept that you're a victim and say, okay, this is bad. This is how I'm feeling. Out of 10, I'm full of 10 out of 10 full of hate, 10 out of 10 full of anger, and just realize that that's okay. You're allowed to have those feelings. And then you can move down and you can say, okay, what must I do to bring it down to a 9 or an 8 or a 7 out of 10? How can I manage those emotions to lessen that intensity? And as I say, there are so many different techniques. Find the help. You are not alone. There are people out there who will help you, who will guide you and hold your hand through it. Know that it may take somebody a week, it may take somebody 3 years. You will go up and down. Once you've dealt with those emotions and you build up some resilience, you then become a survivor. And then once you're a survivor, you've got to work on your grit. You've got to work on moving forward before you can become a thriver. And I'm a very strong advocate of forgiveness. Don't feel you have to forgive, especially not at the beginning, because when you're filled with that hatred or that anger or that pain, there's no ways you can forgive. It's only when you start healing and you start becoming that thriver that you're in a position to say, okay, I can now forgive. So don't beat yourself up if people say, oh, you must forgive, and you say, I can't forgive. It's okay. You're not there yet. You will get there.
Absolutely. And I know it probably wasn't, healthy to think about at that time, but was there anything you thought that you may have been able to do to prevent that from happening? Did you ever have that thought, or, whether you thought you should have been more self-aware, or wore something different, or carried something, or make sure people know your location? Like, was there anything that you kind of went over in your head about where you maybe have went wrong, even though you didn't, of course, but I'm sure a lot of victims do have those thought processes. Was there anything in particular that you thought that you could have done different to avoid that?
It's so interesting because I didn't at first. I just thought it happened, it's one of those bad deals that happened to me. But shortly afterwards, I met this woman who is a karate expert. She was, at the time, I think she was the highest woman in the world, karate expert. She had her fifth or sixth dan, and she had written a book on how to protect yourself against a rapist. And she interviewed me, and then she asked me if she could reenact my scene with her students, and would I come and watch and say, would that have helped? And I'll never forget the day I went to her studio, and there were these little girls, and she had a police colonel, a huge big man, acting as the rapist, and they reenacted my scene, and these little girls fought him off. And I had this, if only I had known how to fight. So that was my big if only. If only there were a few others. If only I hadn't worked late that night. If only I'd been invited out for dinner. If only I'd accepted that dinner date. So there were a couple of if onlys, yes.
So, and I know a lot of victims may feel this way, but I want to ask you, did you blame yourself at any point? Because you didn't mention if I would have did this or if I would have did that. Some folks say if I would have did this or if I would have did that, it could create a guilt where people do blame themselves.
No, I didn't have any blame or self-blame other than if only I'd known how to fight. So I didn't really have that, fortunately, that I was strong enough to realize that it was out of my control, that I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and, it just happened. So fortunately, I didn't have that. But I advise people to just look at the circumstances. And, I had one woman that I met who was drunk, and she was filled with self-blame and self-hatred as a result of it. And we talked it through, and she was okay at the end when she realized that just because you're drunk doesn't mean you should be a victim.
You're a strong person. You don't see many people that can be at that level when something happens to them. But I'm also one that went in and said I forgave. I looked at God and said, God, I forgive him for doing what he did to me. But a lot of people, it's hard.
It is hard, and also you can't forgive when you're still in that victim mode. You've got to come out of being a victim before you can consider forgiving. Because how can you forgive when you're still filled with hatred or disgust or blame or whatever the emotion is? You can't forgive.
For sure, for certain. Yes, ma'am. Now, I guess how do I want to put this? With your book, of course, we want our viewers to read it, but how is it, written? Is it more so of like a biography style, or are you telling the story in first person, third person? What kind of voice are you using for your book, or what would you suggest that what type of voice or what type of perspective would you suggest that those or anybody that would like to write a book use, to tell their story or to, best communicate it?
Well, in my case, as I said, I wrote it as a diary, so it's very much first person. And then I alternate each chapter with some guidance on what to do if you're in a similar situation. So it's a combination of self-help and personal story. Again, it's a personal, I cannot advise anybody how to do it. You might even want to write it as a novel. It doesn't have to be in the first or third person. It can be a story. You create the characters. It is a personal choice. Just know that if you're going to write it biographically, people are going to know it's you, and you've got to know that you're going to be in the public eye. So you've got to make those decisions before you start writing.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we're getting close to time, and I want to thank you so much. So I want to jump into is there any advice or ways that you started your journey to healing that you can give to anyone that you didn't feel like it was a trauma as a child, but some folks look at the scope a little bit differently when they go through certain aspects of a child. So it's very rare that we hear someone say that it wasn't traumatizing. Can you give advice or suggestion, or I mean something that helped you through your childhood with redirected and going through a brutal attack, getting through that, or even one the false having two surgeries that were unnecessary, getting through the emotional piece of that, because I can only imagine how two unnecessary surgeries could have brought some mental emotions along the process.
It's just very important that you don't bottle it up, that you don't keep it inside of you. You've got to get it out, whether you get it out in writing, or if you get it out in speaking, or you get it out in just sharing. Find somebody that you feel safe with. Don't just go blurting out like I did. Rather find that safe place where you feel comfortable, whoever it is, be it a therapist or family. Share with those people how you feeling. Deal with those emotions. It's about the emotions more than anything else. Share it, write it, get it out of you. It's so important. The more you talk about it, as I say, to your cat or your dog, it doesn't matter. The more you talk about it, the more you're going to heal, the quicker you're going to heal.
Absolutely. And we have come to our part of the segment we call Shameless Plug. You see all of your information scrolling here down at the bottom. Please let our viewers know how they can utilize your services, patronize any of your business you got going on here, any merch you have for sale, any scenarios you want to draw attention to, draw traffic to. You have the floor.
Thank you. All right. Well, obviously, my book, Walking Without Skin, it's available on Amazon. I would love you to purchase it. I'd love you to give me some reviews on it. I also have a YouTube channel that I'm busy growing. It's still quite small. I'm busy growing it where I talk about overcoming all kinds of things. I ran a summit on rape. There's a lot of information for survivors of rape. I spoke with many survivors who've got stories to tell, and just hearing other people's stories is so healing, and it certainly makes you know that you're not alone. So there's lots on my channel, finding your feet after you've made a mistake, after a failure. So do go and have a look at my channel. And I do coaching. I do group and one-on-one coaching. So you can contact me. I'll give you a free 30-minute call to discuss if we are fit. And then if we are a fit, I can offer you some coaching to help you on your journey of healing.
Love it. We want to thank you for being a guest on Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. What's your time? What time is it where you're at now?
It is now nearly 4 p.m.
Okay, and we're on 9:52, almost 10, so it's 6 hours. Thank you for South Africa, right?
That's correct.
Yay. So we Unfiltered Unspoken has landed virtually in South Africa. You are our first in South Africa. So you just added to the content that we are trying to expand across the globe. So this is super exciting. Yay.
Yes,
Sid,
thank you.
thumbs
Thank
up.
you.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
my
thanks for the
pleasure.
work and thanks for
Yeah,
the work that you're doing.
thank you. Thank you. We have the same mission to help as many folks as we can. So if you would ever like one of us to be a guest on your platform, I am open. So I just want to let you know that too as well.
Great. Love to have
Yes.
you.
Okay. So we'll chat about that coming off. So we want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we're told you we're going to continue to share life experiences. You have Lois Wagner. She has shared some of the things she went through childhood, a brutal attack that almost left her. She may have not could have been here, the significance of it, but just her strength, her courage through it all. Oh, and also 2 unnecessary back surgeries that she had that should not have been done. But look at her now, and one that left her bedridden for 6 months. And the smile, the testimony, just everything. Thank you so much, Lois, for being a part of Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast.
Thank you, ladies.
It's a pleasure. So, guess what? We will see y'all soon. Ain't that right, City Sig? Because we're going to keep sharing them.
That's right.
See you soon. Y'all have a blessed day.